Are you buffering?
Yeah, I'm buffering. Welcome to Streaming with Two Dudes, a podcast about all things streaming. Each episode, we break down some of the best series, songs, shows, and series. Wait, nope. Best series, some of the best series, songs, movies, and shows. I'm one dude, Parker.
I'm due to Jeff.
And dudes, this week we are talking about 2022's Matilda the Musical. But first, Jeff, what have you been streaming?
Wow. That is a good question. You know, you ask this question every week, so I'm not sure why it still catches me off guard. But hey, that's one thing that won't change in 2023, I guess. I know I haven't streamed a whole lot. I'm sure we squeezed in a Christmas movie or two since we last podcasted, but I don't remember anything major of note. And actually, by the time this podcast airs, nobody wants to hear about Christmas movies by then. So I've got nothing of value to add as far as other streaming. But I'm sure you do. So let's hear what you got on tap.
I mean, honestly, like I've honestly just kind of been putting on YouTube in the background the past week, so I haven't been watching too much myself. I've actually been, playing a little bit more video games this past week. Just I've been in that mood, but I have been watching this show called Made You Look, and it's just like a little docu-series about this fake art that was bought in a scandal behind it, and it's been pretty interesting. I haven't finished it yet, but yeah, that's pretty much the only thing I've been streaming, so I'm kind of in the same boat as you, man. Uh, been a busy week, but yeah.
Well, it's actually cool you mentioned video games because I actually played some here for the first time in quite some time.
What have you been playing?
So my son has a Switch, and I think for Christmas he got some kind of, I don't know if it's just called Switch Sports.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reminded me of Wii Sports, I guess, because
Yeah.
it's I guess motion
Yeah.
sensor are activated. So, it's got the bowling, golf, tennis, and that kind of stuff. So we played that a good bit. And it was actually pretty fun. It was good to play some games again, and did a little bit of Mario Kart, of course.
Oh, dude, love Mario Kart.
Can't turn on the Switch without at least playing that a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty good. The show you mentioned, Made You Look, I guess no relation to Megan Trainor and her hit song here lately that's all over TikTok.
I have not heard that one. I don't know. I'm not a huge Megan Trainor fan, honestly, man. Like she's just never really did it for me. But yeah, I've missed that one on TikTok too. So maybe I'm just the
I
algorithm
don't
does not serve me on that one.
I do find that hard to believe because that song, and there's a dance to it. I mean, I've not been able to avoid it at all. So I'm thinking maybe you did see it and you just didn't relate it to the song that was being played, and that it was from Megan Trainor. Uh,
Maybe. Maybe.
I'll send you one later, and
Okay.
if it's the first time you're hearing it, then we may have to have an intervention because I would be highly concerned.
No, I don't think I want that on my TikTok, honestly. I kind of like my TikTok right the way it is right now.
I mean, it's actually a fun song, and cute dance and that kind of stuff. So, but I know sometimes you're not always into cute, but
I don't really do the whole dancing on TikTok too much. That's probably one of the reasons I don't. So that could be it. I don't really get on the dancing side of TikTok very often.
yeah. Although this week's movie that we're doing could be
It,
classified as cute. I'm sure some people will use that word.
yeah, and there's a lot of dancing involved as well.
Exactly, but no Megan Trainor that I'm aware of. But
Not that I
still.
know. All right, so what else can you tell me about this movie, Joe?
Well, of course, anytime you're dealing with a new movie, you're not going to find a lot of interesting tidbits necessarily. And, that's usually movies that have been around a while, and you hear interviews from the cast, all that kind of stuff. But one thing, I mean, this movie was actually announced like back in 2013. So it took some time to really come together. Not sure what the delays were, but I mean that's the way some movies work. It's just like the idea is pitched, it's accepted, and then whether it's scheduled with the directors or whatever, it took a little while for it to come together. It was filmed in Ireland, like pretty much during the pandemic. So that of course created some challenges. As far as the actors, a relative newcomer that played Matilda, Alicia Weir,
Mhm. Mm,
W-E, not sure how you pronounce that,
I think it's weird.
W-E-I-R.
I think it's weird.
But yeah, she's Irish. Uh, Fit the part well. She's the youngest of three daughters. Her older two sisters are also in performing arts and theater.
Mhm.
So it's definitely in their family. This obviously her not her first role, but obviously her first major role. I would be shocked if we don't see more of her. But
Yeah.
of course, we'll get more into that later. I, I mean, the cast was pretty phenomenal. We got Lashana Lynch, who played Miss Jennifer Honey, the ever classic Emma Thompson as
Love
Miss
her.
Trunchbull. Of course, we can do an entire podcast devoted to her and everything she's been in. She's just one of the classics in of our past few generations.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I didn't really come across a lot of interesting stuff. Yeah, you probably know more as far as I guess the first movie, which I
Mm,
think was 1998.
I think it was
Uh,
96.
96. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like already 20 by then. So I was kind of at the age where I don't really have an attachment to the original movie. I was
Yeah.
definitely familiar with it. I may have watched it. I may not have. I can't really remember. I know I remember scenes and clips. So I didn't really have an attachment to the original movie. So I actually kind of went into this one not sure where to put my expectations.
Yeah.
I can't say I was excited to watch it, but also wasn't like, man, really this one. I was definitely intrigued. So I was definitely wanting to see it. Or not that I really have a choice since we picked it to cover our
Yeah.
podcast, but still. So I'd like to hear maybe how you went into it because you were probably at the age where, especially your generation, probably has a much deeper attachment or appreciation for like the original film.
Oh, for sure. I was probably like 8 or 9 when this movie came out, and I loved it. It was very much like part of the kid power, thing going around. And of course this kid, had telekinetic powers, so it was super cool. So I love that movie, and I still
Kind of
like
like
that movie. It had Danny DeVito in it, Rhea Perlman. They played the Wormwoods, and it was just I don't know, it was very a surreal film because I mean, Roald Dahl, like he's the guy that it's based on a book originally, like from 1988, and he was the same guy that wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and James and the Giant Peach and a lot of those kind of like dark children's book, like darker themed children's books. So, it kind of has that vibe going on that I personally love because I always love that darker children's things. Like I always gravitated towards that. Like I was Are You Afraid of the Dark kid. I was a Goosebumps kid. I was that weird kid. I was watching Erie, Indiana, that kind of stuff. So, this was right up my alley. Loved it. Uh, I was excited about this because, like I said, I love musicals, and I love this movie enough that like I don't really have the kind of attachment to where it's like, how could you do this? Because it's not one of those things that I think, like I'm like, oh, it was done perfectly. So I love the film, the original film, but it wasn't necessarily something so special that I was like, "Oh, this is gonna ruin everything," because the way that they honestly, like, they were 2 different spins on the story. I feel like the original film kinda focused more on Matilda's home life, whereas this one focused more on, like, Matilda and the people that were surrounding her in general. So, I mean, we can get into, like, a little bit more of, like, like, the intricacies of it later on when we get into, like, what I thought of it, but, it it's been a musical, like, originally, like, a Broadway musical, so that's where this came from. That's what this is based on, that's where most of these songs, originated. So, um,
I
yeah,
did read where the final song was a new one they added just for the film.
mhm,
Like I said, they use a lot of the songs from the actual, musical, stage musical,
yeah.
but they did do a couple of one, I guess, new ones for the film.
Well, I think it was just the one, and you know why they do that, don't they? Do that in the typicals of, like, remakes, like, when they're doing, like, either stages like, stage productions to film, or they do, like for, like, the Disney ones where they do, like, 1 or 2 songs that are original for, like, the new remakes. You know why they do that, don't you?
Do
It's
tell.
it's so that whenever they become for I think it's, like, the Oscars, they can be, up for best original song because
Oh,
up
okay.
until then, they can't be because they're not original to the films.
Yeah.
Um, that's
So-
just a little bit of tidbit of one of the reasons they do that, but sometimes it's hit or miss. But yeah.
Yeah, it
If you
definitely kind of made me think of Annie meets Stranger Things.
Mhm,
As far as like you said, it's kind of like the kids versus the adults, the revolting type thing, which I've always loved that angle.
mhm,
Was always a huge fan of Annie.
yeah,
Pretty much every movie adaptation I've seen on stage. I've just always loved that entire story, and just the whole concept. I've really enjoyed it, and like you said, this one kind of followed that similar. But like you said, it kind of reminded me of Annie from that angle, but then Stranger Things because
yeah,
of Matilda's abilities.
yeah,
Kind of remind me a little bit of 11. Not as dark, but
yeah,
uh, but yeah, they did a good job of kind of, and actually, it was one of those where after I watched it, I was like, man, I would really love to see that on stage.
mhm,
And when I started doing research a little bit later, I was like, holy crap, this has already been on stage. I need to
yeah,
see. I'm kind of hoping since there's a lot of buzz around it now that maybe it will travel again.
yeah,
Because I think its first run on Broadway maybe ended around 2017, 2018.
yeah.
So you would think with the movie coming out, and as far as I can tell, it's been really well received, that it would probably go out again and make another tour at some point. So I would love to see this one on stage. Think it would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Alright, well, let's get in to see what I can remember because it's been over 24 hours since I've watched this one. I know you've watched it more recently, so I'm in for, uh, a little bit of a struggle, but the good thing is that I've pretty much have the original one memorized by heart, so I do have a little bit of help there, but there is a lot of things different, so remembering those little details is gonna be a little bit more tricky. But
Plus it's
I have seen this
plus
movie,
it's
like, 2.5 times, so
yeah, plus it's 2 hours long, so there's a lot of stuff they squeezed in there.
there is, but with the musical numbers, that does pad out a lot, so, I
That's
mean,
true.
as far as the basic storyline, it's not gonna be too hard, I don't think. But, we start out with our first little number, our musical number, it's a bunch of babies singing about how special they are, and then we see Mrs. Wormwood, she's in the doctor's office, she's very visibly pregnant, she's trying to deny the fact that she's pregnant. She actually starts going into labor, and she has a little baby girl named Matilda. The father is shocked because he wanted a boy. He's in denial pretty much this whole baby's life. Uh, we cut to Matilda. She's grown up to a young lady. She's probably about 5 or 6 years old. She's very smart. She's hanging out at this traveling library with this woman named Mrs. Phelps, um, who she always is, getting books from and reading. And she goes home, and uh, the there's people there that are it's Mrs. Honey and this inspector that for the school to see why Matilda hasn't been in school. So they decide to put her into this school called Cruncham Hall, and that is Matilda's dad is angry with the situation because he gets a fine, so he takes it out on Matilda by calling the Mrs. Trunchbull, who is the head mistress, and tells her that Matilda is this little brat and warns her about it. And so Matilda punishes him by going and dyeing his hair green. And so she goes to school for the first time. She gets there too early. Mrs. Phelps sees her and they go and share a little moment. Matilda starts telling her the story about this escapologist and acrobat that are in love. And then Matilda meets her friend Lavender, who is also having her first day. And the kids those two girls get a warning song about how the school is to be um, how they should be dealt with in the school, et cetera, and what to expect. And Matilda is and Matilda and Lavender making it to Mrs. Honey's class where they have their first day of school. And Matilda is supposed to polish off some problems that were left on the board from the adult class from the night before. And she actually solves all the problems and continues to solve even more of them. Mrs. Honey tries to get Matilda bumped up to another class because she's so smart, but Mrs. Trunchbull says, she's not, she's a brat, and she warns Mrs. Honey about her, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and then Matilda is at home and she is um listening to her dad's talk about how he's selling these cars to these big guys. And then Matilda goes back to school. She's uh she's standing up for like the little guys at school. uh Bruce, who is this one kid in her class, steals Mrs. Trunchbull's cake, and she punishes him by making him eat the entire cake, and he does so, which just makes Mrs. Trunchbull mad. So she takes him to the chokey, which um she hadn't said before. And Matilda stands up for him again. And uh then Matilda keeps telling the story about the acrobat and the escapologist and how they're in love, and they decide they're trying to have a baby but they can't. And they do this one final act and they prepare to do it, and it's supposed to be the most dangerous act in the world, and basically they can't do it, so they try to cancel it because uh the acrobat's pregnant. And so they cancel it and everybody's happy about it except for the step sister of the escapologist. And she basically uh she basically forces them to do it. The woman falls and breaks all of her bones and dies giving birth to the little girl. And the escapologist is heartbroken and asks the step aunt to move in to help take care of her. And he winds up dead, which she ends up in the care of the step aunt, who treats her like uh horribly. So back to the real world, we find that
Actually,
Matilda.
that whole sequence I thought was kind of funny when when she's telling the story to the librarian,
Oh yeah, and she takes
and
it so
she's like,
seriously.
and she's like, so this is where we get the happy ending, right?
Mhm.
And then it's like, oh no, it takes a dark turn. I'm like, you know what? This would be the difference between Parker and I creating this story.
Yeah, exactly.
If it were me, she would not have failed. He would have slung the fireworks into his, I guess, stepsister's area, and
Uh-huh.
it would have killed her, and then they would have been fine, had the baby, lived happily ever after. But
Yeah.
no, Parker would have been the one that created this dark turn, just like Matilda did.
Yep, you would definitely
Uh,
be Mrs. Phelps and I would be Matilda.
yeah.
100%.
So yeah,
Um,
It made me think of that. I was like, yeah, that's definitely B. Parker.
Yeah, I'm the original Grimm fairy tales, and you're the Disney version.
Exactly.
So we got Matilda. She's standing up. They wind up. She Miss Trunchbull winds up getting mad at all the kids, so she sends them all out to run. Do uh oh, what's that word? Like drills and stuff in the rain, the pouring rain. She's getting angry, and so Matilda uses her telekinetic powers for the first time, and pretty much takes it out on Mrs. Trunchbull. Throws a cup and like makes her run off and everything in frustration. She shows Miss Honey that it was her. Oh, there was a newt. The newt went down into her knickers, and she runs off to get the newt out of her pants. And then Matilda shows Miss Honey that she can actually move the cup, which Miss Honey is like, amazed by it, and she shows her, her house, and that's when Matilda realizes that Miss Honey is actually the little girl from the acrobat, and she tells the story that she's been telling is, a real story, and she she got
So let me stop you real quick.
yeah,
Was that the way it played out in the original film in
no.
'96?
No, there was
So
no story
so
about Matilda's like it does have her talk about her dad, Agnes, but it does not tell the story about like what he did or anything like that.
all right. So I'm curious, at what point did you connect, or did you realize that Matilda's story was actually real life?
I noticed it before the part that it showed Emma Thompson. Um, for some reason, I just had a feeling that it was somehow tied to at least like an analogy. I didn't think it was going to be real life. I thought it was going to be some kind of analogy that she was going through. I thought it was going to somehow play out to like her life. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't realize that it was going to be Miss Honey until I saw Emma Thompson playing the stepsister, and then I connected everything. That was the immediate time that I knew that everything was going to be connected to that somehow. But yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of in the same boat where I felt like her real life experiences were driving the story,
Mhm.
but I definitely didn't connect it to like a real life story, especially with Miss Honey.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I definitely thought the stepsister and the I didn't think the stepsister was Miss Trumbull, but I thought it was a representation of her.
Yeah. And
So yeah,
I thought the escapologist and the acrobat were like her ideal parents that she was telling Miss Phelps that she had. I thought that was like
yeah,
some kind of projection that she was putting on for that. But yeah, like I was like you, I didn't think that that was actually her.
yeah.
So
I didn't
yeah.
realize it until it was more or less revealed, and I'm like, holy cow, that's cool. The way they kind of brought that all together.
Yeah. Um but yeah, I mean when I saw that she was like talking about I think when I talk about when she was talking about the contract and like making her like that was when they actually died. I figured that it was something to do with Miss Honey because I did know that just because I guess from knowing the original film and knowing how Miss Honey and Miss Trunchbull were related, I knew that was a that's a big part of the story. So I knew that somehow that had to come into play. So I was also looking out for that. So I also had that bit of information.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So um that
yeah,
probably had a lot
yeah.
to me.
I guess for me, I was just kind of like, for most of the movie, I'm like, what is Miss Honey's story?
Yeah.
Why is she teaching there?
Mhm.
Why is she under Miss Trunchbull's spell per
Mhm.
se? Uh, so yeah, when that part was revealed, I mean, it all made perfect sense.
Yeah, and in
Uh,
the original film, like she's like this sweet teacher that, they're sitting there and you're having the same wondering like why is she working for Miss Trunchbull for so long. But then it's revealed a lot earlier, I feel like, in the scheme of things that she's, Miss Trunchbull's niece by adoption and her parents died, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't say like it doesn't really go into like her full backstory like it does in this one. Like it doesn't tell her parents how her parents died and all of that. But yeah, um, so we find that story out. So Matilda's like, all right, time to get out, really seek revenge on Miss Trunchbull. She goes and she blows up this thing called Chokey, which is like this basically like this little small box where it's got like things poking in. It's like a homemade Iron Maiden type thing. Uh, and she explodes that, and Miss Trunchbull gets angry and destroys the toy or the playground equipment at school. And that's when she makes all of Miss Honey's class go into, I think it's the cafeteria, and that's where she goes and she has a whole bunch of chokies made for all of the kids, and they start oh well, first she has like this spelling bee, and she tells the kid if they get the letters wrong she's going to put them in chokey, and they all kind of revolt when one kid, misspells a word that's a tricky word, and they all start spelling words wrong on purpose, and then that's when she reveals that she has enough chokies for all of them. And then Matilda uses her telekinetic powers to pretty much just take care of Miss Trunchbull and throws her out of the school by her hair, after freaking her out, pretty much pretending to be Matilda's dead father, who they suspect, was killed by Mrs. Trunchbull. And Miss Trunchbull freaks out enough that she runs away. Miss Honey takes over the school, and the kids rejoice. Um, After Miss Trunchbull runs away, Matilda's parents come by because they're about to run off to Spain because they are being chased by the mob because Mr. Wormwood has sold them some faulty cars and they are not too happy about it. So Miss Honey volunteers to take Matilda and adopt her, which the Wormwoods are happy to oblige, and everybody lives happily ever after. The end.
so since you just covered it, there towards the end, do you think there was any deep meaning or importance of Matilda's dad referring to her as daughter, and he even called her girl, she, her? Because throughout the whole, it's actually quite comical. He's always calling her boy, and she always corrects him. Then you even have a moment at the end where Miss Honey's like, but she's a
Yeah, I think.
so
I mean, there could be. I think if you, I don't think they wrote it necessarily for anything deeper than for the basic, reason, just a more of a reason for the Wormwoods to have a separation from their child. Um, but I think if you're wanting to look for it, you can definitely look at. I think if you're wanting to look at it as like a positive thing, just for the sake of like things going on in society of today, I think you can look at it as, like the child knows what they are and they're standing by it. And, like even if the parent doesn't agree with what they want their child to be, um, that the kid knows what they are and they're firm with their identity. So I think that's a positive message that you can take from it. But I don't know. I don't think that they necessarily wrote that uh for that. I'm not trying to take away credit for them because, like I said, I think they used it as a device to um, basically just give them more of a reason as to why they don't want to have anything to do with their child. um, because they just basically are, like, basically they're basically Matilda's the opposite of them in every way, and that's just another way for her to be the opposite of what they want in a child. Uh, but I mean, just her being true to herself in general, um, sex included, is just who Matilda is. So, you know, purposefully, that part of it's very purposeful. But as far as like any kind of like analogy to anything specifically, I don't think they did that intentionally, but I think it's positive either way.
Well, then I'll add my own analogy to it because which you know me, no matter what we watch, I tend to kind of, I won't say overthink it because I think everybody can watch something and pull different things out, and come up with different themes or messages that spoke to them. And the way I kind of viewed that whole sequence was, she's already coming off a big moment of defeating Miss Trunchbull. I mean, things are like moving towards that happy ending that she's always wanted,
Yeah.
and she knows a different chapter could be starting. And of course, at this point, she doesn't exactly know what that next chapter is. Is it her going to Spain? Is it her staying around and seeing where the school goes? But I thought her calling her daughter and, referring to her girl and her, I think gave her some validation.
Yeah.
And I also think it gave her closure to be able to move on to that next chapter and being able
Yeah.
to stay with Miss Honey because, she even did that final act for her dad by getting
Yeah.
the hat, which obviously was funny, but in that situation, she didn't owe them anything, no amount of kindness. Um, but she was also kind of mentored throughout the movie. The whole two wrongs don't make a right. It's all about kindness. So, like her final act towards, I mean, we can just call it what it is: evil parents.
Mhm.
Um, or evil in a lot of ways. Now, of course, there's been other movies maybe in which it was even more extreme, but it was definitely enough to where she didn't owe them any act of kindness
Right.
as their final goodbyes, but yet that's how she chose to approach it. So I thought that was a really big step with her because you got to remember she's just coming off of this revenge tour
Well, I
as
think
far as
I, I think a big part of Matilda's like philosophy in general, and basically like what I kind of take away from this whole movie's message is, sometimes it is eye for an eye. You know what I mean? And whether that's good or bad, it's like treat people how you want to be treated. And if someone's treating you bad, like you don't have to treat them good. Like there's like but I think like, every time that her father was bad to her for no reason, she was bad to him for that reason, like she got her revenge. And I think when he, kind of wasn't being selfish and wasn't like, because, he's a very, the Wormwoods are very, they're the kind of people that, they care about that, how the world looks at them. And so I think him, even though they don't like taking care of Matilda, I think just that the fact that it is their daughter would be a reason for them to just be like, "No, you can't have her. She's mine." But like we don't love her, but at least she's mine. And so I think Matilda saw him giving her up as an act of kindness. So I think she just in that turn returned it, an act of kindness as well. Because, I think he actually in that moment saw that that was something that would actually be the best for everybody in that situation, including, Matilda, and decided to do it, and that was the first good parenting thing they did the entire film, as far as I could tell. Um, but yeah,
yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point because her one act of kindness towards them was in response. to their one act of kindness towards her.
Right.
Because, like you said, that because I was the same way. I was like, I could almost see it going either way. Like they could just be completely mean about it and force her to go with them. But on the other hand, I was like, they are all about money. And one of the big key things was, Miss Tony's like, I'll pay for it all.
Mhm.
They were like, you'll pay for it all. So I was like, maybe they will let her. But yeah, I'm glad it played out like it did.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even the fact that because he even the way he said it at the end, like, "Well, we are tight on space anyways." Like, he was trying to make it sound like he was being selfish in his decision, but you can tell by the way that he was saying it that he was actually put meaning behind his action in that, and that the actor that played, Mr. Wormwood in that did a really good job of portraying that in that moment. Yeah. So Jeff, what did you think about this movie, man? Let's hear it.
Well, I'm going to say with, starting off the new year, 2023, unfortunately, I don't necessarily think we got off to a good start. Um, but I'm going to say we got off to a great start.
Yeah,
I don't know if I had you worried there for a second,
you
but
did a little bit, honestly.
well, good. I was blown away, and like I said, it's one of those situations where I kind of went in not with a lot of expectations. I think it worked in my favor, not being familiar with the original film.
Mhm,
So I mean, I vaguely remember Matilda like having like special unique powers.
mhm.
And that was really the only thing I really remembered. But I loved how I don't know if the original movie did this, but as far as the musical film, I love how they built up to her using telekinesis because
Yeah,
it's like you suspected early on that she had it, but I mean it was well into the movie before I guess she was first able to use it. So I love the build up to that because I felt like if she'd have used it really early on, I don't think the timing would have been as good. But I love it when a movie builds up to something as opposed to just kind of throwing it out there to you.
yeah.
But the performances, oh my gosh, top to bottom, I was blown away. This new girl on the scene, Alicia Ware, holy cow. Um, I kind of briefly mentioned early on, if we don't see her in a lot more stuff, I would be shocked. I was blown away by her performance. It somewhat reminded me of, I can't remember if we've even mentioned this before. If we haven't, I know we've talked about it off podcast, but Dakota Fanning
Mhm.
in the movie I Am Sam.
Yeah,
Um, it kind of reminded me of that as far as just kind of a child actor that you hadn't really heard from and just totally blows you away.
yeah,
Um, the fact that this was like her first major role, incredible. Obviously, Emma Thompson, you got what you expected from her and possibly even more. Lashana Lynch is Miss Honey. Um, I think Stephen Graham and Andrea Riseborough as Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood. Excellent, especially you mentioned the guy playing Mr. Wormwood. He was incredible. I mean, top to bottom, the story, the performances, the music was great. I mean, there's a number of songs I just thought, wow, that's I really like Naughty.
yeah,
And even the meaning behind that, which is kind of what you were hitting on earlier, as far as almost kind of like an eye for an eye type
mhm.
deal. I love the message in a lot of the songs. Just all the kids, the dancing, the musical numbers. I enjoy musicals as well, but I feel like this is one of those movies. I would be worried about any individual that comes out and said, "Wow, that was horrible."
Yeah,
Like I get it if you're not into musicals, but I find it hard to believe that anybody would actually dislike this film. Uh, just the message behind it, the performances. I definitely want to go back and watch like the '96 film just to kind of compare uh, and even kind of break down each film and musical. I definitely want to see it on stage now, so I'm really hoping it'll, especially after all the buzz on this, that it'll kind of go back on tour. So I'd love to see it on stage. But yeah, I was just totally blown away. It's definitely one of those movies that I wanted to rewatch it right away. I'm like, man, they could easily do a series on this story. I think it would be. I don't think they will, but I think it would be a really popular show. There's so much you could do with that setup that I think it would be a great show as well. So I don't see. I guess what we want to do out of 5 newts. How about that?
All right.
Out of 5 newts. Um, I'm kind of struggling. I've kind of gone back and forth between a 4 and a 4.5. But I remember some of the movies that I gave a 4, and maybe it was too high for some of those movies. But based on movies I've given a 4, I feel like I have to give this one a 4.5 because I feel like I enjoyed this a lot more than some of the movies that I gave a 4 previously. So this matches the highest score I've given all of our previous stuff. Great. It was just great. It was a great recommendation by you. You knocked this one out of the park. It's a great way to start the new year. Totally impressed from all sides of it. I don't think there's anything else I can say about it. I mean, of course, we can go on and on, but there's a lot of deep stuff you could kind of dive into. But so, what about you? Since, like I said, you got a little bit more history with growing up with the original film, and
So, like I said, I mean, I picked this before this had even been released, so I had no idea what to expect. I just did it based on how much I love Roald Dahl's books and the original film, in general. So, I didn't know what to expect, and I love musicals and I love the movie, so I had a little bit kind of high expectations, and they exceeded them, man. I'm like you, dude. I was blown away from top to bottom. These kids, dude, I don't know, like, I thought I've seen good kid actors and performers, but these kids, like, not just Matilda, but the kid that like, some of these kids could dance, man,
oh yeah,
like, crazy, like, they reminded me of, like, Missy Elliott videos, where the kids are dancing, but, like, these kids were just like, the whole choreography in general is just amazing and everything, and, you know, generally, like, you don't get like, musicals don't transform to film very well very often, like, it's a very hard thing to do. It Hamilton even Hamilton, it's they just filmed the stage production. They didn't even it wasn't like a film, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't so it's just man, they did a great job. They did a great job, and like you said, the songs were just top notch, and the performances, like, so, like, you talked about, the naughty song, but, like, some of these songs spoke to me. Like Quiet is probably my favorite song on it. Like, I cried both times that I watched that film, and
funny thing is, I actually thought of you when that song started to play
yeah,
because I felt like I don't know, I can't even explain it, but when that came on, I was like that probably spoke to Parker on an insanely deep level. Um,
it did in
just
more ways than you know.
just
Like,
just because of other conversations we've had, not even on the podcast,
yeah,
and not only you, I felt like that probably spoke to a ton of people that probably never thought they were understood
yeah,
as far as how their mind works, how busy their mind can get. And I was like, wow, that's a powerful, powerful song that you've not seen very many people try to tackle that particular idea.
yeah.
Um,
It was very, very powerful, especially in the moment that it happened in the film as well for Matilda. Um, yeah, it got to me, man, and that and just some of the genius writing, like in the, this I think it's called School Song, where they're walking in and, like, the girl with the red beret who is another amazing actress, like, she was only in there for, like, 10 minutes total, I think, but every time she was on the screen, like, she was just stealing it, like, just great performances all around, dude. Like, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, um, when they were just going through the alphabet, and, like, it was just cracking me up, and just, like, some of the ways that they use the letters, um, with the way that, like, British people speak, like, was just cracking me up, like, instead of, hell, they use the word, like, because they say L, instead of hell, they use that for, like, the letter L, and then the R, like, because they say "arsked," instead of, like, they say "arsed," and stuff like that, like, it was just so funny, and then when they say, like, "phys ed," because they say "z" instead of "z," um, just little things like that, like, was just I always love wordplay like that anyways, so, yeah, just top to bottom, man, this was great, and I I have there's not very many times that I wanna give things a perfect score, but I'm actually gonna do it this time, man, because there's absolutely no reason for me to not give this a perfect score. I enjoyed this. This is one of the few films that we've watched that I've immediately watched, uh, again, like, from the moment that it ended, I was like you, I'm ready to watch it again, and I will watch this movie multiple times. I've already listened to the soundtrack on Spotify, like, I'm gonna give it 5 newts, dude. I'm gonna do it. Um, because
Hold up,
there's
you're
not
saying
much that
right now you're giving a perfect score,
I'm gonna give it my first perfect score.
our first
I'm gonna do
ever.
it. I'm gonna do it. I don't know if it's just the moment that I'm feeling it or not, but yeah, I was struggling between a 4.5 and a 5, and I'm like, if he's struggling between a 4 and a 4.5, and I'm struggling between a 4.5 and a 5, I'm gonna at least I gotta go and give it a perfect score, man, because there's nothing like, every song was enjoyable. There's not much that I didn't enjoy. Like, I have a really hard time not picking my phone up, and that's really kind of how I judge things, and the way this movie is paced, even though it's 2 hours long, I was just glued to the TV both times I watched it. I watched it 2.5 times, and the only reason I watched it half was because, I had to start getting ready for, uh, a New Year's thing last night, so, um, yeah, like, I love this movie, man, and like you said, I would like to go see it on stage. um I like it more than I like the original movie, man, and it just did it great, and I'll still love the original film, They're 2 separate things to me, but this was great. I had a blast. I had a blast talking about it. Like you said, I wanna watch it again already, and I probably will. But yeah,
Yeah,
um,
I definitely want to see if Steph will watch it. Um, I mean, she likes musicals too. Now it's harder to get her to watch more of a, I guess what would be classified as a kid movie.
yeah,
Even though there's a lot of them that once I get her to watch it, she really likes it. But um, I want to say I think she would really like it, or she might think some of it's just too over the top silly. But I think it all just worked excellent, and I have no problem with your perfect score. I think out of everything we've done so far, this would be the one that's deserving. Because yeah, I'm about like you, man. I smiled from start to finish.
yeah.
It was just an enjoyable ride. I
And I
was
mean, even the last song, like the original song, um, the one what's it called? Like, Holding Your Hand or something like
yeah,
that? Um, Still Holding My Hand. That is one of the best original songs that was added to a movie that, I think I've ever heard. That one got to me. That one was emotional, honestly, Um I yeah, I love this, man. I love this film. It's great from top to bottom. Uh, so yeah, that
I,
gives us a 4.75, which is definitely our highest film so far,
yeah, it'll be
overall.
harder. Yeah, I don't know if that will ever be topped.
It can definitely I think it's possible. I think there's a possible
Well,
that
I mean, obviously, there's only one scenario that will top it, and that's if we
yeah,
both give a movie a perfect score. And so it's possible, but we'll have to see how long it takes for that to happen.
yeah.
And
Um,
if I'm not mistaken, this was never released in the U.S. to theaters, was it?
I don't think so. No, I think it just had a run in the UK right now, which is where it's going. I think UK is the only country right now where it's not streaming on Netflix.
Yeah,
Um,
and I don't know how all that works and what determines. But man, I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, man, if this would have been released in the US theaters around Christmas,
yeah.
holy cow, I felt like it would have done incredible.
I would
Now,
like to see this on the big screen.
oh, absolutely. And I don't know how the financials work as far as profitability, because I mean, obviously in the last few years, you're starting to see a lot of movies skip the whole theater route and go straight to streaming. So I don't know how profitable movies are anymore going to theaters. But man, I just feel like this one, because especially when you release a really good family flick around Christmas time,
Yeah.
it normally always does well. And I think this one would have done so well. I don't know if there's plans for it to ever go to US theaters. I was trying to look at that earlier. I'm not really finding anything. Dude, we should have gone to England because I think today they released a like sing along
Oh
version.
wow, that would be cool.
That would have been fun for sure. We probably would have been the only two dudes at the movie singing along, top of our lungs. 35 and up. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, where are y'all's kids? Man, we ain't got no kids. Screw that.
right. I would totally do it. I'm totally down. Um,
Absolutely.
so Jeff, do you got anything to for next week? You got something picked out?
Actually, I do not. Um, I'm still going I know I mentioned several on our last podcast. I'm still wanting to carefully pick my next one, especially after how great this one was. So, um, but we'll have that information. We'll post it in our Facebook page here the next day or so.
All right.
Unless you've already got one you want to set up, and mine can be for the following week.
No, we can pick it. You can pick it as long as we get it in the next few days. We'll get that on there because I'm actually not gonna edit this one very much, this podcast, because I'm gonna throw this one up tonight. So, so
Sounds good.
yeah. So what kind of question you got for me this week? You got anything weird or anything crazy?
I mean, not weird and crazy. It's a pretty popular kind of little cheesy debate question, but hot dog, is it a sandwich or not?
I consider it a sandwich. I mean, like, if that one's not, you're not gonna get me heated too much on that question because I can definitely see how it's not. But the way I feel about it is the bun is very hoagie shaped, and hoagies are sandwiches. So that's my opinion. If I would have, if I had sausage on a a hoagie, that would still be a sandwich. It's just a different form of it. But what about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, you're totally wrong on this one. Hot dog is not a sandwich. If you go to any restaurant and say, "Hey, can I see a list of your sandwiches?" You're never ever going to see hot dog on that list because it's not a sandwich.
But where would you see hot dog? What would you put hot dog under?
I mean, usually hot dog is just like it's a specialty item. It's kind of just like a cheeseburger. It's not a sandwich. It's a burger. A hot dog's a hot dog. There's always going to be certain things that don't fall into a category that maybe it has similarities with because it's just its own thing. It's just the way our culture created it. Um, again, I think maybe a cheeseburger is closer to a sandwich than a hot dog because you might see a cheeseburger listed under sandwiches at some restaurants, but you'll never see a hot dog listed as a sandwich. That's just the way I see it. I love a good hot dog, but I'm either in the mood for a hot dog or I'm in the mood for the sandwich. They're different. It's like I call it like a life audible. There's always things that's going to deviate from the original or the expected, and a hot dog just deviates. It's just although it checks off a lot of boxes for the sandwich, it just doesn't make it a sandwich. What is it?
So
All thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs.
let me
So
ask you. Let me ask you this. Let me ask. So exactly, like not all sandwiches are hot dogs, but all hot dogs are sandwiches.
no,
Yeah, you just proved
no.
the exact analogy. You just said it right there. So let me ask you this: is chili a stew or a soup?
I mean, I guess I would say soup, just because, and I think that varies from what part of the country you live in. Because just from where I've grown up, you don't see stew used a whole lot.
Yeah.
And again, I go back to a restaurant, kind of see a list of your stews. You're not going to see chili listed. You're going to see chili listed under soups.
But
So,
usually it's under soups and stews. So it's not really it's not going to be defined under either one. I feel like they usually
exactly.
have those.
And that's why I think it depends on what part of the country you're in, because like restaurants down here, that I rarely, if any time, see stew listed.
Yeah.
That's usually like something you make at home, or I mean, I'm sure restaurants have it, but it might be listed under soups. But I rarely see a menu that actually has a section called stews. I guess in the South, they just considered everything a soup of some sort.
If it has some kind of liquid base, it's just a soup.
Speaking of chili, do you like chili on your burger?
Yeah.
I
I
don't think
like
that
chili on
gets.
anything. I put chili on my omelet, chili on my ice cream, chili on my waffle.
I mean, that's a little weird, but still, I've never thought the whole idea of chili on a burger gets enough love, because I like chili on a burger more than I do a hot dog.
I
Now,
like both.
now don't get me wrong, I love chili on my hot dog,
Yeah.
but I really like it on. I don't get it on my burger a whole lot, just because a lot of restaurants just don't offer it, or don't do it.
You like eggs on
Uh,
your burger?
I've started doing that in the last year or two, and love it.
I'm a big
Yes,
fan of
so
that. Big fan of
a,
that.
a fried egg on a burger is really good.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
I think I saw it listed on a restaurant one time. I talked to a couple people that said, "Oh man, it's really good." I think I did it at home before I tried it at a restaurant,
Yeah.
and so yeah, solid indeed. Now I've not tried chili and egg on a burger altogether,
Don't
but
think I've done that either. That would be pretty. That would probably be pretty good. Honestly, I would probably love that, and some queso as well, and some jalapenos. That sounds. That sounds like my kind of party.
and here I was thinking I wasn't hungry at all, and here we go.
Yeah, now I'm hungry. So
So, do we do a dude and dud of the week?
we do. We need to do that. Who is your dude or dud of the week?
And that's a very good question. Screw it. I'm just going to go the obvious. My dude is Matilda slash Alicia Weir. I mean, I don't know if there's much we can say that we haven't already discussed, but the performance, A plus, the character, A plus, everything she represented, the way she pulled it off in the film, it kind of reminded me every revolution usually starts with one person's bravery,
Mhm.
one person sticking up for the others, stare fear down the eyes, and that inspires hope and bravery for others. And you saw that come together. You mentioned in your recap during Mr. Trunchbull's little spelling test
Mhm.
where each child stood up and said, "Well, I just spelled a word wrong too," and they just every single one of them. And of course, that's when they were thinking that there was only one Chokey. So it's like you can't throw us all in there, and that's when he's like, "Oh yeah, watch this." But still, that was a big moment because
Mhm.
that's when, and you started to slowly see it before that, the impact that Matilda's bravery and just her courage was having on other people. And then that's when it really all came together. And that's when you truly knew, hey, this is a revolution.
Yeah.
So, dude of the week by far, Matilda and the actress Alicia that played her, man, just incredible from all facets. So, what you got for us?
I got a dude of the week as well, man. I mean, we can't give this movie a dud. Everything was perfect about it. Everybody was perfect. I mean, even Emma Thompson as Miss Trunchbull was perfect, and Mr. and Mrs. Woodward were perfect. Like, even as awful characters as they were, they did such a great job that I loved them as much as I hated the characters. So I'm gonna go with the dude of the week, and I'm gonna give Mrs. Phelps, a dude of the week because, you know, she really, like, helped inspire Matilda to be a lot of who she was, you know, like, she was the first person that really extended a helpful hand to Matilda, and she was just a fun character, and she's an addition to the film because in the original film, Matilda walked to a library and, you know, basically, like, found out about a library from the librarian, but the librarian didn't really, you know, didn't really have that much of a relationship with Matilda other than just, like, you know, giving her books, but they had a lot more relationship in this one, and she was a traveling, you know, in a traveling library and everything, so that was kind of neat. But, yeah, Mrs. Phelps is my dude of the week.
Yeah, great character, and you look at it, and she played such a vital role in, I think, Matilda coping with her current life situation.
Mhm.
She provided that outlet, and even though Matilda wasn't comfortable, like, honestly sharing with
Yeah,
her, what she was going through and what her life actually entailed, she still provided that outlet,
yeah,
through books and just through conversation, and to let her know there is kind people out there,
yeah,
that she wasn't just necessarily trapped in her own little world, that there was a world out there with kind people. And of course, that eventually led her getting to the school. She was able to see that through Miss Honey as well. That first hug she gave Miss Honey, oh my gosh.
mhm.
And then the last one, I don't know what it was, but man, those were some emotional scenes for me. Um, but yeah, the librarian, interesting that wasn't used in the original film, but glad that they used it in this version.
Yeah, like I said, the original film is a lot probably a lot darker, because it's a lot it shows actually, Matilda actually has a brother in the film, and, like, he you know, everybody just kind of picks on her and rags on her the whole film, and, like I said, it shows a lot more of her home life and her being treated, um, poorly and, like, what kind of, like, shows her, like, getting treated bad, and Miss Honey's, like, the first one that's actually sweet to her, um, and it kinda just shows, like, how it pushes her to her limits, you know, more than anything. So I don't know, but this one does a lot better, like, the way that it uses the music to kinda show Matilda's internal monologue as well. Like, it I don't wanna say you're gonna be disappointed, um, but, you know, keep in mind that's 2 totally different things,
Oh
going
yeah.
into it, but this is definitely, I don't I would say I prefer this version of it for sure. I still love the other one, but this one's by far my favorite as far as, like, if I had to pick one to watch, I would pick this one as much as I love Danny DeVito and, you know, Mara Wilson as Matilda, and all of that is just ingrained into my memory. Like, this one was just, as an adult, probably more enjoyable, you know, for me. but yeah. Jeff, you
Yeah,
got any? Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it was one of those where, going into it, I'm kind of get a feel for the movie. I'm like, all right, how dark is this movie going to be? How silly is it going to be? How are they going to tiptoe that line? Because there's a scene where Matilda's telling the other kids those things don't really happen. That's just the bigger kids trying to scare you.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if that's what it truly was. But then when the scene where Miss Trunchbull takes the girl by the ponytail and starts slinging her around, I'm like, I was kind of taken back. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that is like over the top.
Yeah, that's actually a scene in the original film too. So
Okay. And then she slings her.
mhm.
So it kind of has a silly element, but then you're like, all right, does she die?
Mhm.
But then the boy checks on her and she's alive. She gives a thumbs up. So I was like,
Yeah.
no, I kind of like the way they kind of tiptoe. Like they kind of make it a gray, I guess.
Yeah.
Between being a little dark, but not so dark that it kind of loses the silly comedic side of it. But
Yeah. I mean, a lot
but
of that
still,
has to do with just Roald Dahl in general. Like, I mean, like that's kind of his style, you know what I mean? Like that whimsical, dark, like it's like part R.L. Stein, part Dr. Seuss, you know what I mean? It's kind of like toes that line between magical and whimsical and very, very dark and real, and like morbid. Because I mean, like the kids in Willy Wonka and the or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, they're getting sucked up into pipes and going into like incinerators and getting turned, into miniature, like tiny little versions of themselves and et cetera, et
yeah.
cetera.
I mean, it's definitely one of those films that like parents with like young kids. I mean, you probably definitely want to watch it first. I mean, because obviously you're gonna know your child better than anybody else. Because I can see like some younger kids getting so invested and emotional over how mean Miss Trunchbull is,
Yeah.
and just some of the evil things that are happening to Matilda and some of the other kids. So, um, if you're a listener out there and you got like really young kids, give it a watch first, just to kind of gauge your own child's emotions and how I guess involved they get into movie characters. Because I mean, it's like there was many times where I just wanted to reach through the phone and just choke this woman out or give Matilda a hug. I mean, it's you get sucked in. It's an emotional ride, but
I'm actually going to
so
give the
so worth
opposite
it.
advice here. I'm going to say, put this on for your infant in their playpen, like on their tablet. Start them out young with this film, teach them that revenge is, sometimes it's okay to be a little bit naughty. Um,
So,
I'm
but basically, build up that entertainment immunity early.
right, right, right. You want them to go in there fearless, in preschool. You don't want them taking any crap from anybody.
There you go. Work on that telekinesis.
Exactly. How else are they gonna learn?
Exactly.
Um, build that third eye strong early on. Jeff, you got anything else before we get out of here tonight?
I just hope everybody had a great holiday season. I just hope everybody goes into the new year feeling refreshed and just motivated to just tackle new challenges and goals. I don't personally do all the whole like New Year's resolutions. I definitely go into it, with it's almost like I don't know if anybody else is like me, but like during the holiday season, I just like put everything else on hold. I just sit back, ride the holiday season, and then once that's over, then I start thinking about that kind of stuff. But 2022, in a lot of ways, was challenging, but in a lot of ways, it was great. I really look forward to 2023, doing more movies or shows. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, what about you?
Yeah, man. I hope everybody had a safe and fun New Year's Eve, and everybody, is doing well. Um, yeah. Thank you so much for, sticking it out for the end of 2022 with us, and we hope that, you stick around for the whole 2023 and beyond. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much for, listening, and thank you, Jeff, for so much for being here. If you have anything that you would like to share with us, you can email us at streamingwith2dudes at gmail.com, or you can join our Streaming with Two Dudes Facebook group. Just request to join us on there and we will accept you. If you'd like to support us, you can give us 5 stars on whatever you're listening to, subscribe to us, give us a rating, review us. Tell friends about us, family. If you know somebody that would be interested, sharing us is definitely a good way to help us. Links to our socials and our Patreon are in the show notes. Thanks again, and remember, not every New Year's resolution has to be for good. Some of them can be for evil and revenge.
Peace out.